Many years ago, in fact, when I was 18 years old, I sold Mary Kay Cosmetics. And at the time, it was kind of funny because everybody was asking me, "Are you going to get the pink Cadillac?" And I never did get the pink Cadillac, to be fully frank with you. Not that I expected it. I was 18 years old and I was preparing to go to school and get into college. Or I mean, I was on my way to college. But the point here is that every Monday night, I would go, and by the way, I did really well with Mary Kay. That's why I brought this up because I was raking in the money at that time and I was only 18. And one of the things that I attribute that to is the weekly Monday night meetings that they had related to sales and marketing. And one of the things that they talked about is that you'll never necessarily know every single detail about every product that we sell, but you better show up like you do. And that's when I learned the power of confidence and confident communication. So today's episode is 5 tips on how you can build confidence. And it's really interesting when you think about confidence because there's the internal and then there's the external. So for many years in my corporate world life, I trained people how to speak. I could pretty much train anybody to speak with confidence and come across with confidence. And yet it's the internal confidence that can be challenging to get sometimes. Because the other thing that they taught us in Mary Kay, which is that old adage of fake it till you make it. And I know there's mixed feelings about that, but the idea of acting as if is what I would take away from that. How can you act as if? Because we have to take action. Usually, that is what gives us the confidence, the reps of continuing one practice after another, micro moments, those kinds of things. And so, today's episode, I want to give you these 5 tips specifically around how to build that confidence so that you can advance your career and get the opportunities that you want to. So the first one might sound really obvious is to prepare. And I am somebody who naturally is a wing it person. I'm not going to lie to you. I love to just show up and do my thing. And yet I remember way back when I was a corporate trainer at the Gap. And I was so confident. I've always been overconfident in my abilities. This is my confession to you, but underconfident in believing that I'm worthy of things. So a lot of that comes from my background where I had a dad who always said, you've got to ask or you won't get. And yet the modeling of my parents in the relationship was that as a woman, you have to look to a man for authority or you're not worthy of speaking up because that's the man's job. So a lot of unwiring that I have had to do related to that. And thankfully, I feel free from that now. And you can have that same freedom as well. It takes a lot of time, intention, and effort, of course. We've got to get those reps in. So that's what I mean by that. So the first one, again, is prepare in advance. Take a few moments to outline your thoughts because confidence begins the moment before you start speaking. We've got to do this work. Also, we could do a whole other episode on the internal work that's needed so that you have this internal confidence. So first thing, outline your thoughts. What do you actually want to say? Whether it's a meeting, a presentation, or even a one-on-one conversation, that prep helps you feel grounded. So the power of writing down some thoughts. So first, number one, making sure that you have a point. What is the purpose of the conversation? Yesterday, I was on the phone with a client and we were walking through her PowerPoint slides. And as we were walking through them, there was a lot of extra stuff on these slides, like a lot of us have a tendency to do. And one slide in particular had a really wonderful picture all about International Women's Day. And then there was a big URL that I thought nobody is going to type out. Plus, there was one other thing. And I remember the big question that I asked her is, what is the purpose of this slide? And these are really powerful questions. What is the purpose of the meeting? They're very, well, how should I put this? They're simple. They seem almost too simple, like, duh, why would I even ask that? But a lot of times we get in the motions and we don't think to ask these things. So that's the number one thing that I would suggest that you ask yourself is, what is the purpose of this, whatever it is, meeting, conversation, etc. And then write that down. Write down what the point is and how is that relevant to the audience. And then from there, I would write out 3 bullet points. I wouldn't do a whole lot more than that. It all depends on the situation, of course, but there is a rule of three in journalism that's also very important to remember because most of us can't remember more than three things at a time. This is why you see things like the Three Little Pigs, Three Blind Mice, Sex, Drugs, and Rock and Roll, these things that come in threes. So preparing in advance is number one. Number two is to use open body language. Of course, your body speaks words, volumes really, before your words do. And this is a very important thing to remember to have your shoulders back, to stand up tall, and make that eye contact with people as well. You want to focus on 3 to 5 seconds per person when you're in a group setting if you are in person. If you are on Zoom or Teams or any other virtual environment, you want to make sure that you are looking at the webcam. You don't want to be looking all over the place. Yesterday, I was on a networking call with this guy, and it was so weird because I was thinking, imagine if this were in person. The side of his face was to me, and he was talking into the other side of the screen. Basically, he was talking as if he was talking to his right hand. And it was so funny. And I actually asked him, I said, hey, I have a request if you're open to it. And it turns out he was using 3 different computers and he didn't even know where his webcam was. He was just looking at me, which was comfortable for him, but certainly not for me. It was a very weird experience. Imagine being in person and somebody's talking to you, but they're looking at the floor or they're looking way to the side of themselves. So these are really important things to remember. Avoiding crossing your arms. Avoid fidgeting. If you are in one of those chairs with the wheels, be careful about going back and forth. That can that can be a way to make us look nervous, and we look dysregulated as well in our nervous system. And when we look like we're nervous, we don't look confident, obviously. And remembering to use those hand gestures, go big or go home. Think about it that way. Use some big gestures that expand your elbows a little bit outside of your body, which can help a lot in creating more of a presence that shows that you've got gravitas. So there's some interesting studies that show how the more space we take up, the more power we're perceived to have. That's the second one. So once again, first one is prepare in advance. Second tip is use open body language. And our third tip is to slow down when you speak. And basically, the thing to remember here is to pause. Pausing speaks volumes. It is also one of the most tremendous communication tools in so many different situations, negotiations, presenting an important idea, and it holds so much weight that people come across with more authority and more credibility with a perfectly timed pause. Doesn't even have to be perfectly timed. But think about this from the perspective of the opposite, where you know how sometimes people speak so fast that you can't even keep up. We tend to tune people out when they speak really quickly. So remember to have that pace that conveys authority and your audience gives them time to absorb what you're saying. And pausing for effect can add even more impact. So imagine if James Bond said, John Bond, James Bond. It's a completely different effect compared to Bond, James Bond. It's so much different. And it's no different when we are speaking in a meeting. The other thing to think about is remembering to punctuate. Related to pausing, put the periods in the sentence structure that you say. Oftentimes, when I'm coaching people, I see this all the time. And if you start recording yourself, which I would highly recommend you do, you will notice it too. And you'll notice it in other people that we tend to do that uptone or upspeak at the end of our sentences, even though they're statements. So, for example, I might say, hi, I'm Karen Laos, and I'm originally from Minneapolis, but now I live in San Francisco. That's all upspeak versus, hi, I'm Karen Laos. I am originally from Minneapolis, but now I live in San Francisco. Notice how much authority I have in that second one. It's a dramatic difference. And all I'm doing is punctuating my words. And that's all you have to do as well. Practice those pauses where you would punctuate. Just like when you write an email, you wouldn't think twice about putting in commas and periods and question marks and all the things. So making sure to do that as well when you speak. All right, reviewing these three: prepare in advance, number one; number two, open body language; number three, slow down when you speak. Number four, practice active listening. Confidence isn't just about talking, it's about connecting. And when we're more connected, we feel more grounded, and that allows us to be more of our true self. Show that you're engaged by actively listening and responding thoughtfully to people. It builds trust and it helps you communicate with clarity. So, for example, when somebody's talking, don't immediately jump in. Oh, that happened to me too. You don't want to hijack a conversation. Remember the power of the pause. Pause after they've made a statement, and you can ask a question, ask a probing question, such as even as simple as a statement, tell me more. Or, wow, I'm really curious about that. Could you share a little bit more? I would love to hear. Or, I'm trying to think about another one. It could simply be, I am really moved by what you said. Would you be willing to give an example or another example of something, something like that? Basically, if you can have an arsenal of questions in your back pocket, that will help you to not interject. It will help you if you remember, okay, I'm going to ask one of these questions, then that can be very, very powerful. One of the most powerful questions after we've said something is, how did that land for you? And when we say those things, it gives the other person the space and the permission almost, even though they don't technically need permission, but it's an offering. It's an offering of, hey, you go next. I would love to hear what you have to say. So again, let's repeat these just to make sure we've got them. You want to make sure that you prepare in advance. You use open body language. You slow down when you speak. You practice active listening. And our last one is to focus on progress, not perfection. 1% every day, at 1% better every day is still better and it's still progress. You don't have to be perfect to make an impact. Remember that each time you speak up is a step toward greater confidence. And you've got to celebrate your progress no matter how small. So it could be even things like when you're doing something, this is a great way to activate the neural pathways in your brain to help move toward the confidence that you want. So, for example, let's say you're here's what you want to do. Start noticing more of these times that things are going well, that you're doing well. So, for example, wow, I'm so glad that I asked that question just now. Oh, wow, this person is really looking at me. I can feel that I'm present in this conversation. So, starting to have that positive self-talk about yourself, start noticing what's happening in the moment. This will also help you to be more present with yourself. And when you're more present with yourself, you're also more present for other people. There are so many positive benefits to focusing on progress, not perfection. And remember, at the end of the day, literally at the end of the day, I would recommend that you write down one or two things that you were proud of that day. And when you have those compiled over time, it's incredible to look at. One of the things that I'm starting this year, because every year I say I'm going to do this and I've never done it yet, is to, instead of at the end of the year only looking back at the full year, I'm looking back at each month. So at the end of February, or excuse me, January, for example, or the early part of February, looking back at January, what were some of the highlights of this month? And you don't have to make it super complicated. Just say, what are the three things I'm most proud of that happened to me this month? Or what are the three things that I activated? One of my other clients had a challenge called the 100 Ask Challenge. She did this in response to a session that I did, and it was so awesome. She wrote me and she goes, "You are number one of my 100 asks." So that was what her goal was. She has a whole spreadsheet on, she's got 100 spots open up and she's filling in the asks as she goes. So there's so many different ways that you can help build your confidence, and those are just a few of them. So let's review one more time. Number one, prepare in advance. Number two, use open body language. Number three, slow down when you speak. Number four, practice active listening. Number five, focus on progress, not perfection. And I want to remind you that if you're interested in executive coaching, I have a group called the Powerhouse. This is a mastermind for executive women, and it meets twice a month. It's a small group. It's around somewhere, kind of fluctuates between 6 to 10 people, depending upon the month. And the women are amazing. We talk about ways that basically we advocate for ourselves, we ask for support. Everybody joins in, and it is a powerful, powerful group of women. The other thing that I also want to remind you of is if you haven't taken the Confidence Cocktail Self-Assessment yet, check it out. It's in the show notes, and you can click on it and you can take the assessment online. This is my signature framework to help you become a clear, compelling, and credible communicator so that you can advance in your career. And then my last reminder is that I have a guide which is all about 9 words to avoid and what to say instead so that you can come across with more strength in your meetings and in your life. So consider some of those options. And always, if you know somebody who's looking for an executive advisor for their teams or a speaker for an event, I love to speak on any topics related to communication and confidence. So have a wonderful rest of your day.